You know, it's a weird world we live in. Yesterday, I was in the High Plains Desert of Northern California, otherwise known as Sacramento. Today, I'm in Washington State, up the North Cascades mountain range at Deception Falls. It was 108 degrees yesterday in California, and I just saw snow here in Washington. It is currently 48 degrees, very moist. I have to say my sinuses are loving this change from what was going on yesterday. This is the epitome of why I love Washington State, why I find it so much easier to be a fish keeper here. See that water? That's the water that will make it into my tap. And that's coming straight off the mountain into the reservoirs and into our homes. So frankly, people have asked me on numerous occasions how it is I'm able to keep so many aquariums with the plants that I'm able to keep and the ability to make large water changes all of the time. They're like, I can't afford an RODI unit. I say, I know. I don't need to afford an RODI unit because of stuff like this. Right back there. See, the amount of water that comes off of I'm not even in the rainforest part. I'm not even in the rainforest part of Western Washington. I'm just in the forest part. Yet another reason why this is called the Evergreen State. But something has come up a lot recently as to why my way of thinking is geared the way that it is, of like trying to take care of nature, right? See that tree? See this stump? See that stump? And all the other big stumps around here? This used to be an old growth cedar forest, and it's all been logged. Hello. Hey. So considering how wild the area that I'm in right now to the average person would go, oh, this is such a wild place, it seems untouched. Frankly, it's amazingly beautiful, but none of these trees around me are over 100 years old because they've all been logged, and these are the ones that replaced it. And you can notice if you're looking around, and if you're a real, plant or tree person, you start to realize, where are all the big trees? There's nothing but small trees here. I believe there are a few examples of older trees, but they wouldn't really be called old growth. They were just trees that were probably 50, 60, 70, 100 years old when they were cutting down the big trees that are left now. Those really wouldn't be considered much of an old growth tree because they're only 150 years old. none of these trees are old growth, even though they seem old when you walk up to them, right? You're like, oh, that's a big old tree. That's not an old growth tree. But right there, you can see a split tree, which when the loggers came through, that was probably a 50-year-old tree, and they decided not to cut it down. But it doesn't really count for even remotely being an old growth tree, considering the age of the trees are supposed to be. Most of the old growth trees are going to be in the 500 to 600 year old range, and you're not going to have all of these small trees growing down below them. You can see all of the small trees in here. Eventually, what happens is like that tree right there is growing close to that one. One of them is going to win out. The canopy is eventually going to starve the other trees of enough sunlight. And what ends up happening is, let me see if I can find an example of one. There's a good example of one right there. Is that, guess what wins when the tree starts to lose? This stuff right here. The many types of mosses will eventually grow up the tree, choke it out, and it'll be a standing dead tree, just like this one right here. You can see there's a little bit of growth at the top, but that tree ain't going to make it. Here's an actual old growth stump that was cut down however many years ago. It has another tree growing out of it. I love the forest. I love the forest management, and I love the fact that you can it's a source that is regenerative, meaning you can replant and regrow, and you can end up with a forest like this. The one big downside that we're finding is that all of these trees that were planted after these guys right here cut them down, they're A, not very fireproof, and B, not very disease proof. So we are lacking a lot of the actual trees and diversity that is supposed to be here. But one of the things that I've tried to bring up numerous times is that we have what we have, and we have to deal with what we have. We don't have a time machine to go back and tell them to not cut down all of the trees, right? We don't. So what we want to do is work with what we have and try to make the best of what we can, and try to manage and maintain these areas as to the best of our ability as humans who cooperatively work together. This is cool. This is what the root system looks like underground, and you can actually see how shallow it is in comparison to the size of the tree. You can see there's the tree fell down, and you can see this is only, at most 3 feet deep. But moving on, we do have to work with what we have, right? And to manage these systems as best we can, to help promote and maintain them as best we can for the benefit not only for nature, but mainly for the benefit of mankind. Like, we want to continue living here on Earth. There's only a couple of weird billionaires that want to somehow evacuate Earth and go somewhere else. And I think that has more to do with the influence of their brain rot from money than anything else. But this spot right here is really cool. You can actually walk out here. Want to make sure not to step in because that water is super cold, and I will have a super cold foot. Nature provides the beauty. You just have to walk out here and then you film it. That's one of the funny parts of having met so many famous photographers at this point, and you realize that there'll be a photograph. There'll be a photograph that is renowned and an amazing photograph, and you'll go, oh, hey, what camera was that shot on? And you realize it was basically shot on a potato. In terms of technology, a lot of guys are using 15-year-old cameras, so you're like, wow, people haven't been using those in a long time, but they're comfortable with the equipment. And the bigger part is, do they have a willingness to go where the subject is more often than not the most important part. And I mentioned this recently. You could be known as a really good photographer of supermodels, right? If the only people that you take pictures of are supermodels. To be clear, I'm getting old and I don't know who any of the new supermodels are, but I use Cindy Crawford as an example. She was a pretty big deal in the 90s when I was interested more in photography as a job. I don't know where this trail goes, but I'm starting to hear the freeway again, which normally means we're getting closer to the parking lot.